The first gunshot pierced the dawn silence over San Jose, Arizona territory, 1877, shattering Kathleen Sullivan's peaceful morning routine as surely as it had shattered her window. She ducked behind her kitchen counter, heart hammering against her ribs, the freshly baked bread forgotten on the table. Outside, men were shouting, horses whinnying in panic, and more gunshots followed in rapid succession. "This town's going to be the death of me," she muttered, gathering her skirts to peer cautiously over the windowsill. What she saw made her gasp. A man was slumped over his horse at the edge of her property, blood staining his dusty denim shirt. The animal, a magnificent chestnut stallion, seemed confused, walking in an uncertain circle with its wounded master. Without thinking, Kathleen rushed outside, her apron still dusted with flour. "Hey, you there," she called, approaching cautiously. The man didn't respond, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His horse, spooked by her sudden appearance, reared slightly. "Easy now," she soothed, reaching for the reins. The animal calmed under her touch, allowing her to examine the rider. He was breathing but barely conscious, a crimson stain spreading across his left shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open, startlingly blue against his sun-bronzed skin, but no words came. He attempted to speak, his lips moving silently before pain overtook him again. "Don't try to talk," Kathleen instructed, making a quick decision. "I'm going to help you inside." The man was heavier than she expected, but years of working her small ranch alone had made Kathleen strong. She managed to guide the horse close to her porch, then helped the wounded stranger dismount, supporting his weight as they stumbled toward her door. "You're lucky I don't have neighbors close enough to gossip," she told him as they crossed the threshold. A single woman taking in a bleeding stranger would set tongues wagging for weeks. The man tried again to speak, but only a raspy breath emerged. His eyes communicated panic, hands gesturing weakly. "You can't speak?" Kathleen asked, helping him onto her bed. The man shook his head, pointing to his throat, then making a slashing motion. "Old injury," she guessed. He nodded, then grimaced as pain shot through his wounded shoulder. "Well, don't you worry about talking now. Let's get you patched up first." Kathleen began cutting away his blood-soaked shirt, revealing not only the fresh bullet wound but a web of old scars across his chest and back. "Seems like you've seen your share of trouble, mister." He reached weakly toward his pocket. Kathleen helped him retrieve a folded, worn piece of paper. Opening it, she found a hand-drawn map with a name scrawled in the corner. "Preston Yates. Preston Yates. That's you?" she asked. He nodded, his eyes steady on hers despite the pain. "Well, Mr. Yates, I'm Kathleen Sullivan. And you've managed to get yourself shot on my property, which makes you my problem now." She smiled despite her stern words. "Lie still. I need to get that bullet out." As she gathered supplies, Kathleen wondered what kind of man she'd just welcomed into her home. His clothes were dusty, but of good quality, his gun well-maintained, and something about his demeanor spoke of education and breeding, not the typical drifter. The wound was clean a through and through that had thankfully missed anything vital. Still, he'd lost blood and infection was a constant threat out here, 3 days' ride from the nearest doctor. When she returned with water, whiskey, and clean cloths, Preston was trying to sit up. "Don't you dare," she admonished, pressing him back against the pillows. "That bullet might be out, but you've lost enough blood to feed every mosquito in the territory." Preston gestured toward the window, his eyes urgent. "Worried about whoever shot you," Kathleen guessed. "Don't be." Marshal Thompson rode after them. "Besides, nobody comes out this far unless they're lost or looking for me specifically." She began cleaning his wound. "Now, this is going to hurt something fierce." His only reaction to the whiskey-soaked cloth was a slight tightening around his eyes, impressive given how deeply she needed to clean the wound. "Most men I know would be howling by now," she commented, admiration creeping into her voice. "Then again, I suppose you couldn't if you wanted to." Preston's hand caught hers, his gaze intense. He pointed to his throat again, then made a motion like writing. "You want to write something down?" Kathleen asked. "I've got paper and pencil in the drawer there." With trembling fingers, Preston wrote, "Danger, not safe for you." Kathleen read it and frowned. "I've lived alone for 3 years, Mr. Yates. Danger and I are well acquainted." She took the paper from him. "Who shot you and why?" he wrote again. "Thornton gang, I have something they want." "The Thorntons," Kathleen paled slightly. Even in her remote home, she'd heard of the notorious gang that had been terrorizing the Arizona territory. "What could you possibly have that they want badly enough to shoot you for it?" Preston hesitated, then wrote, "Evidence, robbery and murder in Tucson, was taken to federal marshal." Kathleen sat back, suddenly understanding the gravity of her situation. "And now they think I might have it too since I've helped you." He nodded grimly, writing, "Should leave when I can ride." "Nonsense," Kathleen replied, though her heart raced at the thought of the Thorntons coming to her home. "You'll tear that wound open if you try riding any time soon. Besides, I don't scare easily." Preston's eyes held both admiration and concern as he wrote, "Brave woman." "Stubborn woman, my father would say," she corrected with a small smile. "Now rest. We'll figure this out when you're stronger." As Kathleen finished bandaging his shoulder, she couldn't help noticing the contradiction in the man before her, dangerous yet vulnerable, strong yet wounded. His inability to speak seemed to have sharpened his other means of expression. His eyes conveyed more than most men's words. That night, after ensuring Preston was resting comfortably, Kathleen sat on her porch with her father's old rifle across her lap. The desert stretched before her, silver blue in the moonlight, beautiful and treacherous like so much in this territory. Her decision to remain alone after her father's death had raised eyebrows in town, but independence suited her. Now, with a wounded, mute stranger in her bed and dangerous men potentially on their trail, she questioned the wisdom of her solitary life for the first time. Inside, Preston dreamed fitfully of gunshots and silent screams, of documents hidden in a saddlebag, and of a flower-dusted angel with determined green eyes who'd appeared just when he thought death had finally caught him. Morning came with the soft cooing of mourning doves. Kathleen, having dozed in her rocking chair, startled awake at the sound of movement inside. She found Preston attempting to stand, one hand braced against the wall for support. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, rushing to his side. He pointed to the door, his intention clear. "You're not going anywhere," Kathleen stated firmly, guiding him back to bed. "That wound needs at least a week before you even think about riding." Preston shook his head frantically, reaching for the paper and pencil. His handwriting was more urgent now. "Thorntons will come looking. Tomorrow, maybe sooner." "Then we'll be ready," Kathleen replied, her chin lifting with determination. "This land has belonged to Sullivans for 20 years. I'm not abandoning it because of some outlaws." Preston studied her face, seeming to weigh her resolve, then wrote, "Need to hide evidence." Saddlebag. Together they retrieved his saddlebag from where his horse had been stabled. Inside was a leather portfolio containing bank records, a pocket watch with distinctive engraving, and several sworn statements. "This is what they want?" Kathleen asked, examining the documents. "This connects them to the Tucson National Bank robbery. 5 people died in that." Preston nodded gravely. "We should hide it," Kathleen decided. "Somewhere they won't think to look." They concealed the portfolio beneath a loose floorboard under Kathleen's grandmother's heavy oak dresser. As they worked, Preston's hand occasionally brushed against hers, sending an unexpected warmth through Kathleen's body. She found herself noticing details about him, the precise way he folded the documents, the clean scent of him despite his ordeal, the gentle strength in hands that clearly knew how to use a gun. "You weren't always a lawman, were you?" she asked suddenly. Surprised, Preston tilted his head questioningly. "Your hands," Kathleen explained. "They're too fine for someone who spent his life riding and fighting, and the way you handle those papers like someone used to important documents." A small smile touched his lips as he wrote, "Lawyer before. Voice taken in war, changed paths." "The war between the states?" she asked softly. He nodded, writing, "Confederate cavalry, saber wound, damaged voice box." "I'm sorry," Kathleen said, genuinely moved by his loss. "That must have been difficult, losing your voice when words were your profession." Preston's expression turned reflective as he wrote, "Found new purpose. Justice doesn't always need words." "No, I suppose it doesn't," Kathleen agreed. "Though I imagine there are times when you wish you could speak." His eyes held hers for a long moment before he wrote, "Like now. To thank you properly." Their moment of connection was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Kathleen quickly moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. "Two riders," she reported, her voice tight. "Coming fast." Preston was immediately alert, reaching for his gun despite his injury. He wrote quickly, "Not Thornton's, Marshal Thompson and Deputy." Relief flooded through Kathleen as she recognized the riders. "You're right. I'll go meet them." Marshal Thompson, a grizzled veteran of frontier law enforcement, dismounted with surprising agility for a man in his 50s. "Miss Sullivan," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Heard you might have taken in a wounded man yesterday." "News travels fast for someone who lives this far out," Kathleen remarked dryly. "Thornton gang's been spotted heading this way," the marshal explained. "Found blood trails leading toward your property. Figured I'd check if you were all right." "I'm fine," Kathleen assured him. "And yes, I have a wounded man inside. Preston Yates says he's working with the federal marshals." Thompson's expression changed. "Yates, the mute lawyer turned lawman. We've been expecting him in Tucson with evidence on the Thorntons." "He was ambushed before he could get there," Kathleen explained, leading the men inside. "The evidence is safe, though." Preston was standing when they entered, leaning heavily against the table but with his gun ready. Upon seeing Thompson, he relaxed slightly, nodding in greeting. "Yates," Thompson acknowledged. "Heard a lot about you. Never thought I'd find you holed up at the Sullivan place, though." Preston gestured to Kathleen with respect, then wrote something and handed it to the marshal. "Says you saved his life," Thompson translated for Kathleen. "And that the Thorntons will be coming in force once they regroup." "How many are we talking about?" Kathleen asked. "At least 5 that we know of," the deputy supplied. "Led by Jackson Thornton himself." Preston wrote again, his expression grim. "He says they'll come at nightfall," Thompson read. "Their usual tactic." "Then we have until then to prepare," Kathleen said, surprising herself with her calmness. "Marshal, can you send for reinforcements?" Thompson shook his head regretfully. "Most of my men are escorting a prisoner transport to Yuma. Got only 3 deputies total in San Jose right now, including Jenkins here. Then it's the 4 of us against the Thornton gang," Kathleen concluded. "We've faced worse odds, haven't we, Marshal?" "That we have, Miss Sullivan," Thompson agreed with a grim smile. "That we have." Throughout the day, they fortified the small ranch house as best they could. Preston, despite Kathleen's protests, insisted on helping, moving furniture to create defensive positions and checking and cleaning weapons. His wound reopened once, requiring Kathleen to rebandage it, her fingers lingering perhaps longer than necessary on his bare skin. "You should be resting," she admonished softly. Preston's eyes met hers, a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something that made Kathleen's heart quicken. He wrote, "Too much at stake, your life worth more than my comfort." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the desert, the four defenders took their positions. Kathleen and Preston at the back of the house, Thompson and Jenkins covering the front. "Have you ever fired that rifle in anything but target practice?" Preston wrote, watching as Kathleen checked her father's old Henry repeater. "3 times," she answered honestly. "Once at a mountain lion threatening my horses, twice at men who thought a woman alone meant an easy target." Her eyes met his steadily. "I hit what I aimed at all 3 times. Preston's admiration was clear in his expression as he wrote. Never doubted it. The wait was agonizing. As darkness fell completely, the desert sound seemed magnified. Every coyote howl, every rustle of wind through the brush, potentially signaling the approach of danger. Kathleen found herself hyper-aware of Preston beside her, his breathing, the warmth of his body near hers, the subtle scent of him mixed with gun oil. "Were you ever married?" she asked suddenly, needing conversation to break the tension. "Before the war, I mean." Surprised by the personal question, Preston hesitated before writing. "Engaged. She couldn't accept me without a voice after, said she needed a whole man." Kathleen's indignation flared. "That's ridiculous. You are a whole man." Their eyes met in the dim lamplight, a current of understanding passing between them. Then Preston wrote, No husband claimed you yet. No man has offered terms I could accept," Kathleen replied with a small smile. "Most want a wife who'll stay quietly at home, not one who runs her own ranch and speaks her mind." Preston's silent laughter shook his shoulders as he wrote, "Their loss." The moment was shattered by Marshal Thompson's low whistle, their agreed signal, riders approaching from the north. "They're coming," Kathleen whispered, all levity gone. Preston's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing once before they both took aim through the windows. The attack, when it came, was swift and coordinated. 5 riders thundered into the yard, guns blazing. Kathleen and Preston held their fire until the men dismounted, then began picking their shots carefully, aiming to wound rather than kill when possible. "That's Jackson Thornton, the one in the black hat," Marshal Thompson called from the front room after the first volley. "He's mine." The gunfight intensified as the Thornton gang realized they'd ridden into an ambush. They split up, 2 circling toward the back of the house where Kathleen and Preston defended. "They're trying to flush us out," Kathleen realized, ducking as a bullet splintered the window frame near her head. Preston nodded grimly, his jaw tight with concentration as he took aim and dropped one of the men with a shot to the leg. His next shot went wide, however, as pain from his wound made him flinch. "Let me," Kathleen said, taking over his position while he reloaded her rifle. Together they worked in perfect synchronization, one shooting while the other reloaded. From the front of the house came shouts and more gunfire. Deputy Jenkins cried out in pain. "Jenkins is hit," Thompson called. "I'm pinned down." Preston caught Kathleen's eye, pointing to himself then to the front room. She understood immediately. "Go," she urged. "I've got this." As Preston moved to help Thompson, one of the gang members rushed the back door, kicking it open with explosive force. Kathleen fired, missing in her surprise, and the man was on her before she could chamber another round. They struggled, the rifle between them, her strength nearly matching his despite his size advantage. "Where's the evidence, lady?" he growled, trying to wrestle the rifle from her hands. "Go to hell," Kathleen spat, bringing her knee up sharply. The man doubled over, and Kathleen seized the opportunity to crack him across the temple with the rifle butt. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. At the front of the house, Preston had managed to outflank one of the attackers, taking him down with a precisely aimed shot. Marshal Thompson, despite bleeding from a graze on his arm, had Jackson Thornton cornered. "It's over, Thornton," Thompson announced. "Your men are down. Surrender now." "Never," Thornton snarled, firing wildly as he backed toward the door. "I'll kill you all." His next shot hit something in the kitchen, a lantern. Instantly, flames erupted, cutting off the back of the house. "Kathleen!" Preston's silent scream was expressed only in his panicked eyes as he tried to push through the rapidly spreading fire. "Preston, no!" Thompson grabbed him. "We'll go around outside." The two men rushed out the front door, circling the burning building. Inside, Kathleen was desperately trying to drag the unconscious gang member away from the flames while coughing in the thickening smoke. Preston reached the back door first, kicking it open and plunging into the smoke-filled room. He found Kathleen struggling with the dead weight of the outlaw, her face streaked with soot and determination. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder as he carried her to safety. Outside, they collapsed on the hard desert earth, gasping for clean air as Thompson and his deputy managed to drag the unconscious outlaw clear of the burning building. "The evidence," Kathleen remembered suddenly, trying to stand. "It's still in there." Preston held her back, shaking his head urgently. He pointed to his saddlebag, which he'd kept with him throughout the fight. "You moved it?" Kathleen asked, understanding dawning. When Preston made a motion indicating just in case, his eyes saying everything his voice could not. As they watched Kathleen's home burn against the night sky, Thompson approached with the satisfied look of a lawman who'd completed a difficult job. "Jackson Thornton's trussed up like a Christmas turkey," he announced. "The others are either wounded or unconscious. We'll take them all to San Jose at first light." "My house," Kathleen said softly, watching as the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. "I'm sorry, Miss Sullivan," Thompson said sincerely, "but you're alive and we've got the Thornton gang. That counts for something." Preston touched Kathleen's arm gently, his eyes asking a question. "I'll be fine," she assured him, though her voice wavered. "It's just a house." But Preston saw through her brave front. Taking paper from his pocket, he wrote by the light of the burning building, "I'll help you rebuild." "My fault this happened." "Don't be ridiculous," Kathleen replied, wiping soot from her face. "You didn't ask to be ambushed on my property." "Still," Thompson interjected, "the federal marshal's office will compensate you for your loss, Miss Sullivan. Yates here was on official business after all." Preston wrote again, his expression determined. "Not about money, about making things right." Kathleen felt tears threatening, not from the loss of her home but from the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. They made camp that night a safe distance from the smoldering ruins, Thompson and his deputy taking turns watching the prisoners. Kathleen, exhausted beyond words, found herself sitting beside Preston at the small campfire. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "about how differently today might have ended, if you hadn't come along when you did, if I hadn't seen you from my window." Preston wrote, "Fate perhaps, or luck. Either way, grateful." "As am I," Kathleen admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "It's been a long time since anyone fought beside me, not since my father passed." Preston hesitated, then wrote, "You fought bravely. Most would have run." "Running's never solved anything in my experience," Kathleen replied with a small smile. "Besides, where would I run to? This land is all I have." Her smile faded as she glanced toward the glowing embers of her former home. Preston's hand found hers in the firelight, his touch gentle but firm. He wrote, You have more than land, have courage, strength, beauty." The last word made Kathleen blush, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look, covered in soot and sweat, her hair falling from its pins. Beauty might be stretching it at the moment, she laughed softly. Preston shook his head emphatically, his blue eyes intense as they held hers across the dancing flames. He wrote, "Most beautiful when fighting, fire in your eyes." Something shifted between them in that moment, something profound and undeniable. Kathleen felt it like a physical touch, the connection forming, strengthening. How does a man with no voice manage to say exactly the right thing? She wondered aloud. Preston's smile was answer enough. The journey to San Jose the next day was slow, with the wounded prisoners requiring frequent stops. Kathleen rode double with Preston, his strong arms around her as they shared his horse. She told herself it was practical they were short a mount since one of the outlaw's horses had run off, but she couldn't deny the comfort she found in his embrace, or the way her heart quickened when his breath stirred her hair. San Jose welcomed them as heroes. News of the Thornton gang's capture spread quickly through the dusty frontier town, and by nightfall, Kathleen and Preston found themselves guests of honor at the Grand Hotel, courtesy of the grateful town council. "Never thought I'd see Jackson Thornton in my jail," Mayor Harris declared over dinner. "Marshal Thompson says we have you two to thank for that." "The marshal did most of the work," Kathleen demurred. Preston wrote a note and passed it to the mayor, who read it aloud. "Miss Sullivan saved my life twice over. The town owes her a debt." "And we'll repay it," the mayor assured them. "The council's already voted to help rebuild your ranch, Miss Sullivan." "Can't have one of our finest citizens living in a tent, now can we?" Kathleen was overwhelmed by the generosity. "That's not necessary. It's already decided," the mayor interrupted with a smile. "Besides, it's the least we can do for the woman who helped bring down the Thorntons." After dinner, Kathleen found herself alone with Preston in the hotel's small garden. The night was warm, stars brilliant above the desert town, the scent of late blooming roses sweetening the air. "I've been thinking," she began hesitantly, "about what happens next." Preston tilted his head questioningly. "You'll need to take that evidence to Tucson," Kathleen continued, "and I need to rebuild my ranch. Our paths will separate." The realization brought an unexpected ache to her heart. In just 2 days, this silent man had become important to her in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Preston took out his ever-present paper and pencil, writing slowly, deliberately. "Paths can rejoin, if wanted." "Is that what you want?" Kathleen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Preston's answer came not in writing but in action. He stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his eyes asking a question. Kathleen answered by rising on her tiptoes, her lips meeting his in a kiss that spoke volumes without a single word. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Preston wrote, "Been wanting to do that since you saved me." "I think I've been wanting you to," Kathleen admitted, her fingers intertwining with his. They spent the evening planning Preston would take the evidence to Tucson, testify as needed in the Thornton trial, then return to San Jose. Kathleen would begin rebuilding her ranch, this time with a larger house, perhaps one suited for more than a solitary woman. 2 weeks later, Kathleen stood amid the framework of her new home, supervising the construction crew the town had provided. The foundation was larger than her original cabin, with proper rooms for a proper future, whatever that might hold. Every few minutes her eyes drifted to the eastern road, though she knew it was too soon for Preston's return. "Miss Sullivan," called one of the workers, "where do you want the stone for the fireplace?" Kathleen turned to answer, then froze. A rider was approaching from the east, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Even at a distance, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse. Heart pounding, Kathleen gathered her skirts and ran toward the road, propriety forgotten in her excitement. Preston saw her coming and urged his horse faster, covering the remaining distance at a gallop. He dismounted in one fluid motion, catching Kathleen as she flew into his arms. His kiss was hungry, desperate, speaking of lonely nights and the ache of separation. When they finally broke apart, Preston led her to his horse and retrieved a paper from his saddlebag. On it, he'd written, "Thornton's will hang. Justice served. I am free now, free to choose my path." "And what path have you chosen?" Kathleen asked, though his presence answered her question. Preston smiled, taking another paper from his pocket. This one was official-looking with a government seal. He handed it to Kathleen, his eyes never leaving hers as she read. "A land grant," she gasped. "Adjacent to my property. Preston, how?" He wrote quickly. "Payment from government for years of service. Chose location carefully." Kathleen looked from the paper to the man before her, understanding dawning. "You're staying. Not just visiting, but staying." Preston nodded, writing, "If welcomed, want to build life here. With you, if you'll have me." "If I'll have you," Kathleen repeated, tears of joy threatening. "Preston Yates, I think I started having you the moment you bled all over my good quilt." His silent laughter shook his broad shoulders, eyes crinkling with mirth before turning serious again. He wrote, "Not an easy choice. Life with a man who cannot speak, cannot say your name, cannot say I love you. You don't need to say it," Kathleen replied, placing her hand over his heart. "I can feel it, when you look at me, when you touch me." She took his hand and placed it over her own heart. "Then let my heart do the talking. It's saying the same thing yours is." Preston's eyes glistened with emotion as he pulled her close, his kiss a promise more binding than any words could be. The months that followed were filled with hard work and quiet joy. 2 houses rose from the desert floor: Kathleen's rebuilt ranch house and Preston's smaller cabin on his adjacent land. Though they maintained separate residences for propriety's sake, they spent every available moment together, planning, building, creating a shared future. Preston proved himself as capable with hammer and saw as he was with a gun or legal document. His inability to speak became less significant as Kathleen learned to read his expressions, his gestures, the language of his touch. They developed their own system of communication, part written, part signed, part simply the deep understanding that grows between 2 souls meant for each other. In town, they became known as an unusual but respected pair. Preston took a position as an advisor to Marshall Thompson, his legal background and investigative skills proving invaluable. Kathleen expanded her ranch, adding cattle to her horse breeding operation, her business acumen earning the respect of even the most traditional ranchers in the area. Winter came to the Arizona Territory, bringing cooler temperatures and holiday celebrations. On Christmas Eve, 6 months after the fateful day when a wounded cowboy had collapsed on her property, Kathleen welcomed Preston to her completed home for a special dinner. She had spent days preparing, cooking his favorite dishes and decorating with pine boughs and candles. Preston arrived with a small pine tree strapped to his saddle, a luxury in the desert, and together they set it up in her parlor, decorating it with paper stars and popcorn strings. After dinner, they sat before the fire in the stone hearth that Preston had built with his own hands. Outside, a rare desert snowfall had begun, dusting the landscape with delicate white. "I have something for you," Kathleen said, retrieving a package from beside the tree. "I wasn't going to wait until morning." Preston opened it carefully, revealing a leather-bound journal. Inside, the pages were filled with Kathleen's neat handwriting stories, observations, moments from their time together. "I thought," she explained softly, "that since you write to speak to me, I could write to preserve our story. So someday we can look back and remember how it all began." Deeply moved, Preston kissed her hand before retrieving his own gift. It was a small box, simply wrapped. Kathleen opened it with trembling fingers to find a gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. Her breath caught as Preston knelt before her, taking paper from his pocket. On it, he had written what must have taken hours to compose a beautiful proposal, heartfelt and eloquent, ending with, "I cannot promise to tell you I love you every day, but I can promise to show you, with every beat of my heart, for all the days we have together." "Will you marry me, Kathleen Sullivan?" "Yes," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Kathleen cupped his face in her hands. The wounded cowboy couldn't speak, but he never needed to. His heart said everything. They were married in the spring of 1878, when the desert bloomed with unexpected color. The ceremony in San Jose's small church was attended by the entire town, Marshal Thompson serving as Preston's best man. When the minister prompted the groom to speak his vows, Preston took out a special paper on which he'd written his promises. But instead of having the minister read them aloud as planned, Kathleen stepped forward. "Let me," she said softly, "let me be his voice today." With clear, strong tones, she read the vows Preston had written, her voice steady with love and certainty. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. "By the power vested in me," the minister concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Preston's kiss spoke of promises, of passion, of a future built on understanding deeper than words could express. Their life together unfolded with the seasons. They combined their properties into one thriving ranch, building a reputation for the finest horses in the territory. Preston's legal mind and Kathleen's practical business sense made them successful partners in work as well as in love. Communication between them evolved into something almost magical to outsiders. Kathleen seemed to know Preston's thoughts before he wrote them down, responding to unspoken questions, laughing at jokes he had only begun to express. For his part, Preston found ways to show his love daily in gentle touches, in thoughtful gestures, in the passionate way he held her each night. A year after their wedding, Kathleen discovered she was expecting their first child. When she told Preston, his joy was a tangible thing, his eyes speaking volumes as he held her close, his hand reverently touching her still flat stomach. "I think it's a boy," Kathleen told him one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "Strong like his father." Preston shook his head, writing, "Girl, beautiful and fierce like mother." "Either way," Kathleen smiled, "this child will have quite the story to tell about how their parents met." Their daughter, Sarah, was born on a crisp fall day, her lusty cries filling the bedroom where, not so long ago, her wounded father had been nursed back to health by her mother. Preston held his daughter with trembling hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he gazed at the perfect new life they had created together. As Sarah grew, she became the bridge between her parents' worlds. From Kathleen, she learned to speak with clarity and conviction. From Preston, she learned the value of listening, of communicating in ways beyond words. By the age of 3, she had mastered a complex system of hand signals that Preston had developed, allowing father and daughter to have silent conversations that delighted them both. When Sarah was 4, a brother joined the family, James, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. The Yates family became known throughout the territory for their compassion as well as their success. Preston used his legal knowledge to help settlers with land claims, while Kathleen became an advocate for education, helping to establish San Jose's first proper school. 5 years after the night Preston had arrived bleeding on her doorstep, Kathleen sat at her desk, writing in the journal she had kept faithfully since their engagement. Preston entered quietly, placing a cup of tea beside her before kissing the top of her head. "I was just writing about the day we met," Kathleen told him, looking up with a smile. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't been shot that morning? If you'd made it safely to Tucson without crossing my land?" Preston considered this, then wrote, "Fate has mysterious ways. Would have found you somehow." "You think so?" Kathleen asked, taking his hand. "You believe we were meant to find each other?" Preston nodded, writing, "Some connections transcend circumstance, ours one of those." Outside, their children's laughter floated through the open window as they played in the spring sunshine. Inside, a man who couldn't speak and the woman who had learned to hear his heart shared a moment of perfect understanding. "You ever miss it?" Kathleen asked quietly. "Your voice?" Preston thought carefully before writing. "Sometimes. Miss singing to children, miss saying your name." He paused, then added, "but found other ways to express what matters." "You certainly have," Kathleen agreed, rising to embrace him. "You speak more clearly with your silence than most men do with 1,000 words." As the years passed, their ranch prospered, their family grew. Sarah followed in her father's footsteps, studying law in San Francisco before returning to Arizona. James took to ranching naturally, eventually taking over the day-to-day operations from his aging parents. When Preston and Kathleen celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire community gathered to honor them. Mayor Thompson, the former marshal, now in his third term, presented them with a plaque commemorating their contributions to San Jose's growth and prosperity. "The Yates family has shown us all what can be accomplished with determination and heart," the mayor announced to applause. "They've built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of compassion and justice." That night, after the celebrations had ended and their guests had departed, Preston and Kathleen stood on their porch under a canopy of stars, much as they had on countless nights before. 25 years, Kathleen marveled, her hair now streaked with silver but her green eyes as bright as ever. "If someone had told me back then that a wounded, mute cowboy would become the love of my life, I'd have thought they were touched by the sun." Preston's smile was tender as he wrote, "Luckiest day of my life, getting shot on your land." Kathleen laughed, the sound as clear and beautiful to Preston as it had been the first time he heard it. "Only you would consider a bullet wound lucky, Preston Yates." He shrugged, his blue eyes twinkling with mischief before turning serious. From his pocket he withdrew a small package wrapped in silk. Inside was a gold heart pendant, simple but elegant. "It's beautiful," Kathleen breathed as he fastened it around her neck. Preston wrote, "Your heart spoke when I couldn't, carried me when I was wounded, loved me when I thought myself unlovable." "And it's still speaking," Kathleen assured him, placing his hand over her heart. "Still saying the same thing after all these years." As they embraced under the endless Arizona sky, their love story begun in gunfire and silence, built on understanding and resilience, continued to unfold in the language they had created together. A language where the most profound truths needed no words at all. 30 years after that fateful day, Preston and Kathleen sat together on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard that had once been scorched by fire during their first battle together. Their ranch had grown into one of the most successful in the territory, their legacy secured through children and grandchildren who carried forward their values of justice, compassion, and determination. Preston's hair was white now, his face lined with the stories of their years together, but his blue eyes remained clear and sharp. Kathleen's once auburn hair had silvered elegantly, her spirit undimmed by the passing decades. They still communicated in their unique blend of written notes, gestures, and the deep understanding that comes from a lifetime shared. "You remember," Kathleen asked softly, "what I said to you that first night when you were trying to warn me about the danger?" Preston nodded, writing with hands now slightly gnarled with arthritis. "You said your heart would do the talking." "And it's never stopped," Kathleen replied, covering his hand with hers. "Not for a single day." In the distance, the desert stretched vast and beautiful beneath the setting sun, much as it had on the day a wounded cowboy rode into her life and changed it forever. Their story, begun in silence and spoken through the language of the heart, would be told for generations to come, a testament to the truth that love finds its voice in ways far more powerful than mere words.